What is up, everybody, and welcome back to TarHeelIllustrated.com for another edition of the UNC Football Show. I'm Jacob Turner. Joining me, as he always does, is our very own publisher, Andrew Jones. And AJ, we're here for the James Madison edition of the UNC Football Show. Noon kickoff this Saturday in Kenan Stadium. That game will be on ACC Network. Carolina currently a 10.5-point favorite. Over under is set at 47.5 for all the sports bettors out there watching this pod. And I'm sure there's quite a few, to be honest with you. So, AJ, let me run down what we're going to talk about in this one before we dive in.
Not a lot of confidence in the offenses in this game with that over.
Yeah. I'm not necessarily surprised at that over under, and I'm really not necessarily surprised at that line only being 10.5 as well. When you look at, Carolina and maybe some of the offensive struggles in particular, which we're going to hit on in this podcast. But just to run down a few topics real quick, we're going to talk a little bit about injuries here in a second, talk a little bit about the defense, particularly the defensive line, the quarterback situation, of course, and maybe a little bit about Amarion Hampton and how the offense has kind of been centered around him before we dive into JMU a little bit more later on. We've also got a couple questions from some people on Twitter as well. We'll answer at the very end of this show. So stay tuned for that. If you are someone who did submit a question, maybe we'll be answering on this one. So, AJ, I want to start with injuries. You've been just living in the Kenan Football Center on Monday and Tuesday like you do for the whole season, really. It might as well be your second home on Monday and Tuesdays. You just never leave that place. But I'm going to take you back to Monday to talk about some of the injury news that was given by Mack Brown in his press conference, and just run through that real quick. He said they are working on Austin Blaske, who's obviously missed last week. Darwin Barlow as well, been out a couple of games just like Blaske. DeAndre Boykins, Noah Burnett, who missed the Central game, and Aiden Banfield as well.
Nate McCollum.
Nate McCollum is being monitored, and I know Caden
I saw Nate yesterday. He looked fine. So,
I thought that was a little bit of a surprise. So injuries stacking up a little bit. I'm not talking about guys that are just completely out. That's just K'Mon Rucker right now. But, as you expect, going into your fourth game, guys a little bit banged up, guys being monitored throughout the week. Would be nice to get someone like Austin Blaske in particular back, especially when you look at just the new look offense, new quarterback kind of situation being filled out. Not to mention he's completely new to the offense as well, and just does not have a lot of experience starting at this level. So what are your thoughts on kind of this injury situation right now? It'd be really good to get Noah Burnett back too, because he's been pretty good for the Tar Heels the last couple of years.
Liam Boyd giving him another game is fine. Noah, they need him when they hit ACC play. They need Blaske to play as soon as possible. He told me last week, I ran to him in the elevator last week. He told me he was going to play.
Yeah.
I could see why they held him out, and Zach Greenberg got a lot of good reps. Greenberg has 120 reps now through 2 games at this level, which is good. He needs that experience. But with Jacoby likely taking the majority of the snaps, if not all, at quarterback, how many times do you think Blaske snapped to him in August?
Mm-hmm.
Not much. Because to understand, Blaske was snapping to Max and Connor the whole time because Blaske was the starting center. Connor got some reps. The practices I was at, it would go maybe 2 snaps Max, 2 snaps Connor, 1 Jacoby, and then 2 Max, 2 Connor, 1, and then 2 Max, 2 Connor. So Jacoby, even in August, wasn't getting that much. And so Blaske, by the time Connor became a possibility, when he sort of entered into the discussion stream, Blaske was already hurt. So he needs to play. The 2 of them need to play in a real game, and because they got Duke afterward. Duke's going to get after it defensively. They just need to be on the same page as much as possible. This is they're not even in the evolutionary process offensively right now. They are still into figuring out what the parts are, where the parts are before they begin evolving. So we may not know exactly what the comfort level or the synergy between Blaske and Criswell is for a while. If it is even Criswell, you just never know. Could end up being Connor later. Who the heck knows? And I know people are saying, God, did you see the game? Yeah, I did. And we're going to get into this a little bit later, but you just don't know right now. I think the unknown at that position is so massive that we know at least Blaske and Jacoby need to have reps together.
Yeah.
And they need game reps together. So that's why it's important he plays. Barlow, I think Davion Goss has passed him by. I told you all along I thought he would. Caleb Hood's still a bit banged up. Charleston French even got some reps last week. And had a touchdown or had a big run. I think it was a touchdown run. Yeah. The other injuries, McCollum, I think should be fine. Who else did you say in
Aiden
there?
Banfield and DeAndre Boykins.
Yeah, Banfield was close to playing their day. They decided last minute not to. It's good that Malik Gowan got a lot of reps. He needed that. So Banfield's a true freshman. He needs them too. Before they head to Duke, I think if he were to go up against the JMU front, that would be the best he's gone up against since Minnesota. So you need that going into Duke. Mm-hmm. They got to get ready for ACC play while trying to figure out what on earth they are behind center. So they need to get their guys going because this will be the last test, obviously. And the ACC play is going to be enormous because almost every game, if you look at it right now, can go either way. So you got to be at your best heading in, and they need guys to play to be at their best.
Yeah, no, 100%. I couldn't agree more with that. I'm going to call an audible here because we were going to talk about the DL first. We've hit on the quarterback a lot, so let's go ahead and start with that because I know that's obviously top of mind with Carolina fans as well. So we probably should have started with that one in the first place. But just building on it, the QB situation, I guess my question would be, and I think I have an answer to this in my own head, and based on kind of what I'm just hearing from Chip Lindsey and Mac Brown, is it Criswell's job to lose now? Because I thought some of the quotes on Monday were, both him and Harrell are supposedly going to be getting the same amount of reps in practice. No way to really know unless you're there watching it. If it's 50-50, is it 60-40? Is it 75-25? But that's what we've been told. Do you view it? Because I think a lot of Carolina fans agree with this based on what they saw against Central, based on, what we've seen on the message boards as well. I think a lot of Carolina fans would prefer it now to be Criswell. But do you see it as a situation where it is Criswell's job to lose now? Or do you think it's one of these situations that it's just too early to tell because of the small sample size we've seen Jacoby Criswell?
This is one of those times where I think, and I get where the fans are coming from. I've read a ton of the stuff. I've had conversations. I think if you just base it on what we saw, obviously Jacoby looked like the better player. The guy who actually, as Max said after the game, he threw the ball. He threw it to somebody that was in one of the route. It was part of the route tree. Okay. Connor wasn't doing that a lot. So there were a lot of things Jacoby did that we hadn't seen Connor do just yet. So I get that. But there's also a reason Jacoby was behind Connor. And people need to understand that what you see, you don't see practice every day. These guys, the coaches they understand. Jacoby wasn't just behind Connor. I told you last week, there was a greater distance between Connor and Jacoby than there was between Max and Connor. Mm-hmm. And part of that is because Jacoby showed up to fall camp 20 pounds overweight because he didn't think he was going to play much, if at all. This is a grad school deal, just like I said back in May. Now suddenly he's thrust into a position of playing. And the reason I caution people, and I'm not saying it's not, and people need to understand the words I'm saying here. I personally, based on what I saw, it would be really hard not to put Jacoby behind center on the first play. But I caution you about this. Jacoby had nothing to lose. Mm-hmm. He's in his fifth year, hasn't gone the way he thought it would. He left for Arkansas, came back. Tad Hudson hits the portal, spot opens up. They needed a fourth quarterback. Everything kind of worked out. Carolina knew what he was all about. He knew what Carolina was all about. It made sense. And he was a distant third. And he shows up to fall camp 20 pounds overweight. And he's been losing the weight. He's lost 15 pounds or so. I guess he's got a couple more to go. But he went onto the field last week with literally nothing to lose. Again, fifth year. He's got another year of eligibility after this season. But I think that there's something to say about, I'm actually playing. Okay, let's just go have some fun and play. Mm-hmm. Now, how is that different this week when suddenly there's the pressure of the starting job, the QB1 job dangling in front of him? I think that changes the dynamics mentally, psychologically. Mm-hmm. And the people that watch our videos know how much you and I harp on human nature. Absolutely. Human nature is a massive part of what happens out there. So what is his human nature this week? Does he go out there and he's still loose? Like, you know what? That was a lot of fun last week. Let's just let her rip. Mm-hmm. Or does suddenly he tense up a little bit and say, my gosh, I have a chance to be QB1 at this program for the rest of the season because there's still 9 games and a bowl game left. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a different mental approach. He knew he was going to get the third series last week. Now he could end up starting and get every series or get a lot of series, or Connor starts and he goes in on series number 3 and then maybe takes over if he plays well. We don't know. So I caution people because you saw him in a completely relaxed mode against an FCS team. So let's see what he does against some of these other teams. Mm-hmm. All that said, because he can throw the ball, because he threw the ball to guys in the route tree, and because Connor has looked, and I can say this, I think that the staff is very surprised that Connor hasn't appeared ready for the moment. And you've seen that in the throws. You've seen that not going through the progression. You've seen that in him throwing the ball to places that were not inside the route tree. And it hadn't changed. Connor admitted after Charlotte that he was still nervous. At what point, and we talked about it last week, what point do the nerves stop? Mm-hmm. At what point do you hurdle that speed bump and you move on and the nerves are behind you? I'm not sure that's happened yet. His first throw against Central looked like a nervous quarterback who wasn't super confident. And at this point, he's probably not. He probably has some confidence stuff. So we'll see. I think that this is the storyline. I did a drop out the other day, Jacob.
Yeah.
We could talk about the other aspects of this team, which I think are solid to very good everywhere, except this one position, which is a giant, massive Carolina blue question mark hanging over. And I think how the season ultimately goes hinges on what happens in that position group.
Yeah, I remember talking to I was up in the stands last Saturday, and I remember talking to my dad was there and a couple of fans as well around me, and I kind of harped on what you said a little bit of, like, you understand the situation Criswell's coming into. He's playing with house money a little bit here coming into this issue. There's no pressure on him really right here to come in and do much. It
will be this week.
100%. And what I said to them was, wouldn't really surprise anybody if he starts against JMU and struggles. I mean, because of the situation being different. Now, I'll say this too. I don't think you can take but so much out of JMU regardless. Say he has a pretty good game against JMU. That alone, that's a positive. It's something you can build on and say, okay, we're seeing some progression there. But, and I've harped on this every podcast, I feel like I've talked about this game, AJ. We're not going to know but so much, particularly when you look at a quarterback who has not been in this situation before, who transferred to Arkansas, wasn't the starter there, wasn't the starter previously at Carolina. He hasn't had that pressure. And it's a different pressure playing against JMU at home than it is going to Duke on a Saturday, going to Charlottesville, playing Georgia Tech at home. I don't know if we're going to have a great idea, regardless of what happens on Saturday, of what this quarterback situation really is until they're put in those environments. And I'll even create that on a broader scope, AJ. I don't think we're really going to know what this team is yet until we see them in those environments. Because I think we'll talk about the defense in a second. I think the defense has been really good. And I like a lot of what I've seen from the defense, AJ. But we had these same conversations a year ago through the first 6 games, and then it fell off when they lost to Virginia. I like a lot more about where this group is now, especially under Jeff Collins. I don't expect that to happen. But there's no way. You talk about the schedule being a gift for the quarterback situation. You could compare it to the team as well being a gift for them when you look at just all the new faces everywhere. But I don't care if Criswell goes out there and throws for 300, 350 yards against JMU. I think that's a great thing. Yeah. But I don't necessarily think that translates to ACC play. You know what I mean? I just don't think you can jump to conclusions like that.
But you got to look at Criswell's map. So the only times he's gotten quality snaps in a game, Wofford a couple years ago when he played the first half and then Drake played the second half. Sam was out drinking coffee on the sideline that game. That's the one game I missed because I was up at the up in Connecticut at the Mohegan Sun because basketball was up there. So I was like, well, I can miss an FCS game. So he played a half against Wofford. It was not a very spectacular half. Last year at Arkansas, KJ Jefferson got hurt and he played the last 3 quarters or whatever it was in like a 50-point loss to Missouri. And he was there. And then he played Saturday in a no-pressure relief role against an FCS team. That's it.
Yeah.
So when you think about it, it will be his toughest test as a college football player. Mm-hmm. Because by the time he got into the Missouri game, it was like 21-0. All right. And it was the last game of the season, and Arkansas was going nowhere. So there was no pressure there. There was no pressure in the Wofford, a little bit of pressure in the Wofford game, but it was an FCS. There was no pressure last weekend with Central. House money. Now the house money thing is out the window because he's now competing to be the starter for almost a full season at North Carolina, a place where Sam Howell and Drake May just played. And by the way, outside of that little snippet in 17 and 18, you can go back to TJ Yates, you can go to Bryn Renner, you can go Marquise Williams, you can go Mitch Trubisky, you go Sam Howell, you go Drake May. There's a pretty nice lineage of quarterback history in this program. And even Nathan Elliott had 300-yard passing games and 9 starts in 2018. That staff figured out a way to move the ball with him some. Mm-hmm. So he's suddenly on that stage for this program that's had that kind of success with dudes that could chuck it around. I just think it's different. And Madison is better than Wofford was 2 years ago. Madison's better than than Central. And because of the circumstances, it will be a better challenge than Missouri was last year because of the circumstances. And Madison's given up 13 points in its 2 games. It's not like it's given up much. So the defense looks like it's there. It's the offense that's still trying to figure things out for JMU. So I think if he throws for 330 and 3 or 4 touchdowns and looks good doing it and gets the ball in the route tree and everything else, I think that's a really good sign. And that can build toward Duke. I think that's a better case scenario than him going out there and throwing a pick and being high and throwing the ball deep 3 or 4 times and having the ball shoot out of a cannon like it did last week and him way overthrowing everybody. You got to connect one of those at some point.
Yeah.
So I think there's tremendous value in this game if he's the guy. You know what? If he's not the guy and suddenly Connor is more relaxed now because it's not 100% his job and all the talk is Jacoby. The press conference on Monday, Mac, it's all about Jacoby. With Chip, it's all about Jacoby. Yesterday, we're talking to John Copenhaver, who used to room with Jacoby several years ago at Carolina. It's all about Jacoby. No one's asking about Connor. Suddenly, Connor gets to sit back, take a deep breath, and go out there, and suddenly he's playing with a little bit of house money, if you will, at least some change in his pocket. Mm-hmm. So I think this is a wait and see. Agreed. It's a wait and see. It's easy to say Jacoby has to be the guy moving forward because he checked some boxes Saturday that we haven't seen Connor check yet. Mm-hmm. Okay, I get that. Let's just wait and see because there's a reason he was a distant third behind Connor. Maybe that shows up this week. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe mm-hmm. he's suddenly a guy, the light goes on, and he's a much better game player than he has been a practice player. We don't know. We're going to find out, and that's what's going to make these next few weeks so fascinating. And to your point about defense, if the defense can carry him, then they're going to have time to figure this out.
Yeah, it's definitely still a TBD situation at QB for North Carolina, and I say it, feel like every football show too. Let's just wait and see how it plays out. We're going to learn a lot more this Saturday, and we'll learn a heck of a lot more the following Saturday when they travel to Durham. But AJ, I want to switch the focus to the defense, and I want to talk. I know we've talked to the quarterback situation right now. It's not a negative situation, but it's a little bit. It's a glass half empty kind of situation right now because of what we've seen and because of the fluidity of it right now.
It's the hanging chat of the 2020 presidential campaign.
Yeah. It's the easiest and obviously the easiest thing to talk about, but it's the most important position on the team. So there's a reason we're harping on it.
Sorry, I think I said 2020.
2024, you mean?
2000.
2000.
Yeah, the hanging chat. Anyway, I'm just scratch that from the surface, everybody.
No, I love your
record, people.
I love your analogies when it comes to you got a lot of analogies like that.
I think I screwed the pooch on that one.
It happens to the best of us, man. Defensive line. I want to talk about a group that I think has been a big positive for this team. Jeff Collins praised them on Monday. Just to quote him, he said, quote, "I think the defensive line is playing at a really high level," end quote. And again, that's from Jeff Collins. And just to run through a couple, I put out a tweet on Tuesday, I think it was Tuesday morning. I went and looked at not PFF related, but solely just NCAA stats, Division I FBS. Looked at kind of where Carolina ranked in a few of the key defensive metrics, just to see. I know the competition hasn't been elite so far, but just to get some kind of gauge of where they're at right now through 3 games. Ranked number 14 nationally in run defense, number 18 nationally in team sacks, number 25 in total defense, and number 49 in team tackles for loss. So again, 19 tackles for loss this season, 10 sacks on the year. there's no way you can't look at those rankings and look at some of those stats, regardless of who they're playing. You can only play who's in front of you, and feel pretty good about where this defensive line's at. And we've talked about it a lot, AJ, for the last 5 seasons I've been doing this, but a lot last year as well, and a lot going into this season. Of it all starts in the trenches. Football's not rocket science when it comes to that. It's pretty simple in a lot of ways. Of if you're not very good up front, you're probably not going to be very good as a unit. Right. And I think one of the reasons the defense, it has been able, again, against albeit a little bit lesser competition in Charlotte and Central, and even Minnesota to the extent, because I don't think they're great offensively. But when you look at what they've played and what they've had in front of them, they've performed well. And the defensive line, again, has been one of the biggest positives that I've taken away from that group, which I think has more than just the defensive line is positives as well. But what is your thoughts because of the importance of it starting in the trenches, the importance of new guys stepping up, Travis Shaw playing a ton now, looking like the guy Carolina hoped he would be, Joshua Harris coming in, not really missing a beat, really being, a positive impact player for him, Kevin Hester, Des Evans being praised all over the place. I thought that he looked really good against Central. And AJ, they're doing it without K'Mon Rucker too, who's the best defensive player. So I think when you look and factor all that in, there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic about this defensive line and defense as a unit going into the rest of the season. A lot of bigger tests to wait. Not going to shy away from that at all, because we saw a pretty good defense last year through 6 games before they fell off a cliff. Yeah. But I do agree with Jeff Collins that I think the defensive line is playing at a really, really high level. And I also think that there's a ton of room for improvement down there still. So what is your thoughts on that DL and what you've seen so far through 3 games?
Well, in order for a unit to be really good, it helps when the individuals in there are playing well for each of them. And there's not one guy in the defensive front that's playing below expectation. Mm-hmm. They're either playing at it or above it right now. Collins said the other day, Kevin Hester is going to play this game for a long time, NFL player. Everybody knows that Travis has got first-round potential. They've had conversations with him like, dude, you've got all this in front of you, but you've got to make it happen. You have to carve yourself into the intangibles and make it work. And I think we're watching Travis do that. Josh Harris has been very instrumental as being an older guy that could show him the ropes. He's a dude with 2 kids and 1 on the way, and he's a grown man. And Travis is watching a dude who's a grown man go about his business, and he's learning a lot from that. Jacoby Cowan is playing, when he's healthy, he's playing better than what they expected. Des Evans is playing off the charts. Do not look at his numbers. Watch how he plays out there on the field. Bo Atkinson is Bo Atkinson. The Ritzy has got 5 sacks. Like he leads the ACC in sacks. So big time. And I think really when you look at the collective of it, look no further than goal line defense to see the obvious improvement with this group. Last year, I'm working on a piece about goal line, but I charted every possession a team had with a first and goal last year. There were 24 times opponents had a first and goal against Carolina. They scored 18 touchdowns. They had 5 field goals, and there was a turnover. Now, what's wild is the last 4 trips ended up in field goals. So, of the first 20 trips last season, opponents had, when they had first and goal against Carolina, they had 18 touchdowns. Now, through 3 games, I believe there are 9 such occasions and only 4 touchdowns allowed. So they're bowing, and one of them was when they got a stop and had to regroup and stay out there and got another stop after the Marcus Allen penalty the other day. So they got 2 stops in the goal line in 1 possession and ended up forcing a field goal. So they have been a lot better. They're getting more pressure. When you look at the pressures from the conventional guys up front, it's higher. The numbers are better than they were a year ago. The sacks are there. I asked Stick Lane on Tuesday, from your perspective, what is different? He just said they're assignments. Playing your responsibilities sounds really easy, but the individuals have to be better to then handle each of their battles. So across the board, they're all handled, and that allows the other guys to make plays. Amari Campbell has been a beneficiary of the front line playing really well because it's allowed him to use his lateral skills to make plays. So I think the defensive line's been good so far. I think it's going to stay good. Now, it's probably not going to post the same kind of numbers The most rushing yards allowed is 78 in a game. I think this is the first time since 08 or something like that 3 straight opponents who did not rush for 100 yards. There's a lot of pretty good defensive numbers, but let's keep in mind, Charlotte's not any good. Central's FCS, and I think Minnesota's offensively challenged. Minnesota's other 2 games put 48 up on Rhode Island, which is an FCS team, and last weekend they beat Nevada 27-0.
Yeah, 2 shutouts.
They weren't exactly electrifying, but that's better than what Carolina did. I mean, one of their touchdowns against Carolina was after an interception return to the 6-yard line. So the Tar Heels did a nice job against Minnesota as well. I don't know how much we're going to learn Saturday against Madison because Madison's offense has not been very good. Then you got Duke. I don't think Duke's offense has been that great either. Malik Murphy has been kind of Georgia Tech will be the telltale because Haynes King can come in here. He can obliterate any defense in the country. That will be the game where we really find out. Maybe even Pitt, too, because Eli Holstein has been pretty good for the Pitt offense, a young quarterback. So maybe we learn about the defense those 2 weeks with the Panthers and Yellow Jackets coming in back-to-back weeks. Not sure we'll learn a ton the next 2, but the consistency with how they've handled third downs. Defensively, they've been very good on third down. With how they've handled goal line, with the pressure that they're putting on the quarterback conventionally, those things have been there. And they've been there each week. So I don't have any reason to believe that even while there may be somewhat of a drop-off, Jacob, I don't think there's going to be a huge drop-off. I think they're going to be pretty solid throughout the year.
Yeah, I think they should be. I do. And again, I've been pretty impressed from what I've seen. Keeping in mind the competition, like you said, I still think there's a lot of positives to take away from these 3 games. And again, I mean, you talk about the goal line situations as well. I mean, there was one, I think it was in the first half, I believe, before near halftime. I can't remember, it all jumbled together, but just one of the worst rough in the passer calls I've ever seen on Des Evans. I mean, in what world was that rough in the passer? I mean, there was a couple of those plays too where you're like, man, the defense could have got off the field there if that penalty wasn't thrown. So I do think you have to keep that in mind against Central, because I just remember there was a couple plays. I know Mac harped on penalties, too many penalties in that game, and I do agree there were way too many. But go back and watch. I know our very own Kevin Roy texted us yesterday, and he said, I went back and watched the game, and good Lord, were there some just bad penalty calls out there. That
Kevin Roy says that that's law, but I think it was an aberration. I think the penalty, part of it, you're going up against a program that you think, is outmanned compared to you, that you should dominate. Sometimes you get a little overly pent up to just make a play and dominate. I would imagine, Jacob, if, when you were a 4th-year starter at Wake Forest High School in soccer and you played against a 12-year-old down the street, you'd be over anxious to just dominate, right?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
So Carolina may have been playing a factor. We go back to human nature and everything. That may have been a factor the other day as well. And Collins did say that Central got them with some hard counts on some of those lining up offsides penalties and stuff. But I think that was an aberration. Now, if they get 12 this week and 12 at Duke, then most of them are defensive, then we're going to have a whole podcast about penalties. And Matt will talk about, well, I got all these officials here in fall camp, and they're here to practice every day, and they're not throwing the flags and all that kind of junk. We'll hear all kinds of stuff about that. But I think right now that was an aberration. I think this is going to be a clean defense.
Agreed. I do as well. I completely agree with your thoughts on that. I want to talk about one more thing offense related before we move on to the JMU preview portion. And I think this is a fair question to ask. And I think it's one that I've seen over Twitter and our message boards as well being discussed is there an over-reliance on Marion Hampton? I believe somebody asked him on Monday, Chip Lindsey on Monday about it. And he was like, yeah, got to do whatever it takes to win. And I think that's a great answer for a coach to say, because at the end of the day, it is about winning. And, as an offensive coordinator, when you got such a talented back, of course, you're going to utilize him. And of course, you're going to utilize him even more in a situation that Carolina finds itself in, where the quarterback situation is just TBD is what I'll keep calling it. Yeah. But I think you look at his load. Okay, 25 carries against Central. I'm not going to sit here and say I don't think Carolina wins that game without Omarion Hampton, but I can guarantee you they don't win that game by that big of a margin without Omarion Hampton, because he got him through a
carries in the fourth quarter because 17-10.
I know. This
team wants to, if they want to minimize Omarion's carries, other guys are going to have to get the job done, so they don't need him in the fourth quarter in a game like that. That was not a good sign.
Yeah, 30 against Minnesota. I don't count that one as much. Opening game, quarterback goes down.
5 receptions. He had 35 touches, and they ran 64 offensive plays.
It's a ton, man. I mean, it's over half of the plays he's getting touches in. Only 11 against Charlotte, but obviously got injured in that game. Didn't play a lot in that one, so that one would have probably been 20 plus if he didn't go out hurt in that game. But so I think the reason I want to talk about it is the question that I think is being presented to being discussed is A, is there an over-reliance on Omarion? But B, I think most importantly, is that really an issue? And is that an issue when you look at the competition that Carolina's playing right now? Because when you look at the numbers and the reliance on him right now and the quarterback situation being kind of up in the air and still fluctuating, you're talking 25 against Central. You're probably expecting him to have a similar number, if not more, maybe a little bit less against JMU, depending on how the game goes. But I mean, could you see that number go up even more when Carolina starts playing better competition? I think that is the worry, because while I like what Davion Goss has, while I think Darwin Barlow can play with some when he's healthy, Caleb Hood, a decent running back, but he can't stay healthy. There is still a lot of question marks behind him if he is to get dinged up again, if he is to, God forbid, get injured at some point. So do you see that as a problem right now, or do you think it's just one of those situations where, I mean, heck, Carolina doesn't really have a choice right now when you look at how that quarterback situation is playing out?
Well, for starters, Omarion doesn't want to come out. Even in practice, he doesn't want to sit out reps. So Omarion wants to be on the field. So it's not like Omarion saying, hey,
take me out, man.
Watch my workload. Omarion's not thinking about the wear and tear as he moves on after this year to the NFL. The staff is probably like, hey, we don't know what we have at quarterback, but we know we have the best running back in college football and a decent offensive line that can open up enough room for him to break tackles. And they have perhaps one of the best running backs in school history now. So you want to use him. And he's okay with carrying the ball a ton. He wants to be out there and carry it on every play, basically. So there's no issue there with that. The issue is the wear and tear during the course of the season. Every time he runs the ball, he runs the risk of getting hurt. You don't want to have a guy like him run 25 times against an FCS team. I would think that really good running backs whose teams face FCS teams generally don't carry it 25 times. He also had a reception and had a drop on a screen, so he should have had 27 touches against an FCS team that they should have beaten worse than they did. The game should have been over in the first half. Take care of business. You don't need to worry about giving Omarion a ton of snaps. So, yeah, I do think it's a concern simply because of the wear and tear. As strong and good as he is, they're riding him over. He's already got 11 more touches than he had this time a year ago after 3 games, and they haven't gotten into the bulk of the schedule yet. If you think about the quarterback situation, he got he didn't have to get a ton of touches last year because he had Drake out there. Now it's going to be Omarion left, Omarion right a lot of the time, especially when they try to shorten games. They're trying to play complementary football, keep the defense off the field some. And if they have leads in the fourth quarter, they're going to go to him and they're going to pound the ball. Mm-hmm. There used to be this. I grew up in the Washington, D.C. area, and I'm dating myself here, but some of the old timers will remember John Riggins, running back for the Redskins, and they called him the Diesel. And they would get a lead in the fourth quarter. And if you're listening to Sonny Sam and Frank on the radio, Sonny Jurgensen, Wilmington native, who is one of the color guys, they would play the sound of a diesel truck every time on the radio, every time Riggins would get the ball, because they're just draining the clock and they're using the diesel to get to the finish line.
That's hilarious.
Omarion Hampton, they might as well run a damn diesel sound when he gets the ball, because they are going to use him to run out the clock and win games throughout the course of this season. But are they going to give him a 12-carry workload in the fourth quarter if he's already got 15 or 20 carries? How are they going to work that out? I just think that there are going to be some games where he's going to be like Mike Voigt. If you remember Mike Voigt, go back and look at the Duke game, I think in 1976, how many carries he had and how many yards he had. That would be, I don't think you could ever get away with that now. I don't think they'd want to, but he had 30 touches to beat Minnesota. Mm-hmm. He's going to have 30 touches in a game again. So he's got to stay healthy. He's, in a weird kind of way, outside of quarterback, he's the most important player in the team. Mm-hmm. Because you don't know what you have the rest of the guys. I think Goss is going to be really good, but you can't use him that way. There is a comfort, a safety valve that is Omarion Hampton.
Oh, yeah.
And even Jacoby's like, look, I have O right there. Of course I'm not. I don't have to worry. I'm comfortable because at the very least I just give him the damn ball. Mm-hmm. But you don't want to give it to him 45 times a game.
This might be a bad comparison. I want to get your thoughts on it, but does the situation kind of remind you a little bit of in completely different teams, completely different sports? But we talked a lot last year in basketball about RJ Davis at times, the over reliance on him, where he's shooting 20 plus shots a game and he's, scoring 25, 30 points. And it's like, yeah, that's good. And he's really good, but that's not the best situation for this team long-term success wise. Do you see I know again, completely different. Yeah. Do you see that situation?
I do, because that example came up in the press box during the game the other day, where what they needed Omarion to do to win that game was like needing RJ to score 40 to beat Charleston Southern.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's great. You got through it, but what did you get out of it? If they need RJ to hit 40 to beat Elon in the opener, what do they get out of it?
Yeah.
So the other night, there was an opportunity for Goss to get 12 carries, for French to get 8 carries, and for Omarion to get in and out of there with 7, 8, 9, 10 carries, and they didn't take advantage that way. They didn't get the job done that way. In fact, there were people on our message boards before the game that when I reported, yes, Omarion's warming up, oh, we don't need Omarion today. Oh, yeah, you did. Yeah, you did.
Yeah. Oh, no doubt.
So I think that illustrates the concerns at quarterback, because in a game like that, your quarterback should be able to just pick apart. And that didn't happen. And that's why you needed Omarion a lot. So until the quarterback can do some of that, they're going to be over reliant on Omarion, because at least they know he can get the job done. He's the best in the country. So why not use him? Yeah. And you got him for one more year. So might as well just use him as much as you can. It's all about getting W's, man. Any means necessary within the rules. And if it means Omarion getting 30 carries a game, then I think that's probably going to happen a lot.
He won't be mad about it, because, again, he just wants to play. But, yeah, and I think to end it on a positive note against the offense, because I do think there are reasons to be a little bit concerned about it. I do think at the quarterback position, because of the weapons you have, is particularly a wide receiver and tight end. It's not like Carolina has a shortage of skill position players. I mean, they have a lot of really talented guys, not to mention a guy like Omarion Hampton. If you can just get some average to above average quarterback play on a consistent basis, I think, and focus on, hey, like, we don't need to do anything special. We just need to get the ball to our playmakers consistently. I think this offense can end up being fine, but until we see it, we're going to have to sit here and talk about it, because, again, we haven't seen it yet at that position. So
yeah, I think that's what they think they had in Max. And I know Max hates the idea of being called a game manager, but there's nothing wrong with being a game manager.
No.
I think most quarterbacks, you got to be able to manage a game, then you grow from that. You don't go from being, hey, I can wing deal and I'm throwing this thing all over the place, but man, I really have a hard time managing a situation. So you want to be able to manage first. It's like walking before you run, and then you go from there. I think they thought they had that in Max. And that's why Max won the job. The progression, the control out there, to all that. We didn't see that against Minnesota, except we saw a little bit of it starting in the third quarter, but that's what they thought they had.
Yeah.
Connor has shown them nothing about being able to manage a game and just make the distribution throws and keep that thing moving downfield. Jacoby showed a little bit of that the other day, but I warned, as I said earlier, all the things I said earlier still stand out. We don't really know. We'll find out maybe something Saturday, or a little bit more Saturday. I have a feeling that this thing is going to be evolving for a while. Well, not even evolving. It's just going to figure it out, and then they can evolve. As I said before, if you're the receivers, you're kind of in a limbo mode, because you don't really know who the quarterback's going to be. And you're not really sure how you and the quarterback are with chemistry and everything. They have a lot of guys at the skill position that can catch passes. And it's kind of a shame that the quarterback situation is such that they're not really able to utilize all those guys the way that you would think, if you're the coach or if it's your team, you would want them to be able to do. I think some of these dudes that maybe under a Sam or a Drake would catch 40, 50 balls, 60 balls, may not be in that range this year, because there aren't going to be as many balls to catch.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. It's fascinating to cover too, isn't it, AJ? Because under the Mac Brown 2.0 era, this quarterback situation has never been a question or concern. I mean, it's fascinating how it can, this is what we talk about, we talk about the process and everything. And I think we haven't really had to talk about the process at quarterback necessarily the last 5 years, because of how talented they were. Now it's a situation where it's not just really about one individual. It's about this whole group and the whole offense and the whole coaching staff happened to sit here through 3 games and try to figure it out because of what happened last game, where Criswell all of a sudden, who we were told in the weeks leading up, oh yeah, he's getting closer to being ready. He's getting closer to being ready. And all of a sudden, third series against Central, he's thrown in the mix and he looks pretty good. So it's a fascinating one from a journalistic perspective because of how fluid it is and because of how we don't, it's hard. Nobody knows what's going to happen game to game at that quarterback position right now, because there's no proof in the pudding to really know and look at and be like, well, we saw him do that last year for a season. Let's just see if he can do it this year again. It's like, no, we have not seen anything from either of these guys ever. This is the first time we're getting to see him. So it's really interesting to cover from a journalistic perspective.
If this offense was a house, they're kind of at a point right now where it's not a matter of, hey, should we paint the dining room light green or beige?
Yeah.
You've got to find the foundation where you're going to put down, where you can dig a hole and put down the concrete and go from there.
Yeah.
We don't know what their foundation is yet. Then once you do that, you can add all that other stuff. Mm-hmm. But they don't even know where the foundation is yet. That's where they are, and they're going into game 4. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They may be figuring this thing out all year, or it just may not be there. Or maybe Jacoby is one of the great stories in college football.
Yeah, it could be. I mean,
if he ends up being the starter and has a really good year and they win a lot of games with him, it's going to be an amazing story.
Yeah.
It's going to be an amazing story for everybody, but they're not there yet. So they're still, they've driven out a few old neighborhoods and I kind of like that foundation, but I'm not really sure yet. Mm-hmm. Let's see how it handles a big rain.
Yeah. It's TBD, man. It's
totally TBD. Totally TBD.
And we'll see what happens. Keep it locked here for all your analysis of that situation throughout the season. We'll be here every step of the way. But AJ, let's move on to the JMU preview portion of this podcast. Again, noon kickoff in Chapel Hill. JMU coming in at 2-0 on the year, coming off a bye week as well, so a little bit extra time to prepare for North Carolina. 30-7 win over Charlotte, and then a 13-6 win over Gardner-Webb in their last outing a couple weeks ago. So, look, I know that you mentioned too that Charlotte game not necessarily a little bit closer than that scoreline reflected. I think they struggled.
Did you see the Gardner-Webb Charlotte score?
No, what was that?
Gardner-Webb.
Oh yeah, no, I did.
Into the fourth quarter.
Yeah, I did actually see
Charlotte
that.
Came back and won.
Mm-hmm. I saw some highlights. One of the Charlotte wide receivers had an unbelievable one-handed catch for a touchdown too. Don't know if he could do that again if he tried. I think it was SportsCenter top 10. So I did see a little bit of that one. That's the play that pops up in my head. But yeah, I mean, JMU, I think the bye week's an intriguing one, just a little bit extra time to prepare in a bye week after 2 games in which, again, offensively in particular, they've struggled a little bit, especially against Gardner-Webb. But they're under first-year head coach Bob Chesney, who took over for Kirk Cignetti, who left for Indiana, picked to finish second in the Sun Belt East Division this year behind Appalachian State, 21-5 overall record since 2022 as well. So, again, this is a program that has really done some really nice things. Again, under Kirk Cignetti, new head coach now. That's why it's a little bit up in the air about maybe what they have and what they're going to end up being this season and moving forward. But Carolina connections, again, AJ, leading rusher right now is George Pettaway, obviously a former Carolina running back who transferred after last season, 18 carries for 114 yards on the year, 1 rushing touchdown, 2 touchdowns on the season, also has a reception TD. So, good to see him going somewhere, going to an in-state school as well for him being from the Virginia Beach area and looking pretty good. And I'll give you another connection. I don't know if I think it was mentioned in the press conference. I heard it after the fact, funny enough, because I was looking at their quarterback situation. But redshirt sophomore QB Alonzo Barnett, dual threat QB, also went to Grimsley High School and same high school as Travis Shaw. Barnett was actually the 4A state championship game MVP back when they won it a couple years ago during that undefeated run. So a little bit of that Travis Shaw connection. I'm sure Travis will be looking to get all over Barnett on Saturday. But AJ, I want to just focus on defense and offense real quick at JMU, because I think you look in the defensive side of the ball and it's a defense that's allowed just 13 points on the year. So I think you have to look at that as a positive form. One thing I did see, though, and I think this is something Carolina's going to look to target on Saturday, particularly through the tight end position, particularly maybe through some short passes through maybe some slot receivers across the middle. linebacker position. All four of their linebackers who played significant minutes have graded out as 65 or below on PFF. So that is a position Carolina will be looking to exploit if they're smart, and I'm sure they'll be game planning some packages to kind of maybe get those guys in 1v1 situations where they're having to cover a guy like a Bryson Nesbitt, a guy like John Copenhaver, maybe a Christian Hamilton or a Kobe Paysour as well, getting some of those guys running across the middle. So I do think it's a defense that, again, kind of like Carolina, shown some positives against some lesser opponents, but still 13 points through 2 games. That's something you have to kind of look at and look at it being a positive for them. And then on the flip side, though, AJ, it's an offense that, despite that 30-point game against Charlotte, and a lot of those touchdowns scored a little bit later in that one, it's an offense that struggled in its last game big time, just 269 total yards against Gardner-Webb in a game in which they scored just 13 points. You have to look at that game because it's the last one they've played, and maybe they figured something out during the bye week. But I do think when you look, like you said earlier, when you look at how Carolina's defense has played, particularly across that front, it should be a game in which the defense holds this offense to some, low scoring and some low yards in this one, because I do think it's a situation where Carolina will be looking to take advantage on that side of the ball. So, yeah, I think JMU, nothing really looking at it that stands out and impresses you. If they're playing them this time last year, I think we're having a little bit of a different conversation right now. But when you look at it being under a first-year head coach, a lot of turnover in the program, questions at quarterback, questions on defense with maybe how good they really are, I think it's a game Carolina will be looking to win. I think it's a game that Carolina should win relatively comfortably. I'm not saying they should blow them out, but I don't think it should be one that, just go look at the Central game. That was a struggle. I think we should see a better performance from Carolina against JMU this Saturday, but it all starts at quarterback. So, I mean, it's hard to really sit here and guarantee that. So what's your thoughts on JMU? Because, again, if we're having this conversation 365 days ago, I mean, I think it's a completely different one.
Well, Cignetti's a good coach. He's already had a significant impact on Indiana. They just blew out UCLA on the road, and they're 3-0. Mm-hmm. And I think 7 or 8 of their starters are JMU transfers. So he took a lot of guys with him. The JMU is coming off an open date, and with a new staff after 2 games, it was a great time to have an open date. And what I find really interesting is I spent a lot of time reading up on Bob Chesney, their head coach. Interesting guy. Watched the press conference the other day. He's cut his teeth in small Northeastern college football, like Assumption. He was at Johns Hopkins, Holy Cross. These are programs that are have a totally different mission from a football standpoint than a North Carolina or even a JMU does. I don't know when the last time this guy walked into a big stadium was, because their one road game was at Charlotte, which is like 24,000 seats or whatever. I don't know if he's gone to a game as a fan. Maybe this weekend will be the first time he's been in a stadium with 50,000 seats in forever. Because he's one of those guys, and I was talking to someone over in Chapel Hill about this on Tuesday. Roy Williams used to talk about coaches at smaller schools, and I think it was Rick what's-his-face at Belmont, built Belmont for a while, and he would talk about guys like that and say, man, there are so many great coaches out there that nobody knows who they are because of where they are, and they choose to stay, or that just becomes the pipeline that they go into. Chesney's a guy who's had a ton of success at going places and giving it a fairly quick shot in the arm and quickly getting them on the winning track. The JMU, I think, is the first job he's taken where it was already in really good shape when he got there. So he's sort of adjusting as well. I think in the open date, they're going to fix some things that have gone wrong offensively. I think offensively they appear challenged. I'm going to throw a stat out at you that is wild, wild, wild. But they have 702 yards of offense this season. 702. 391 have come on 13 plays.
That is a good stat.
So the other 113 offensive plays, they've run 119 offensive plays. Or it's 100, they were 119, so 113 of them, they got 391 yards. The other 106, 2.9 yards a play.
Just big plays all over the place.
And Petaway's leading them in rushing, but I don't think he's their number one ball carrier. He had like a 53-yard touchdown run that helped him, and he had another 20-yard run or something. That's helped his numbers, but yeah, I don't think he's their RB1. If he is, he wasn't in the first 2 games, so we'll see what the deal is with him. But this is a club that has been solid defensively. There's a great culture there. They have a head coach who got an open date after week 2 when they had a lot of things to work on both sides of the ball. There was only 10-6 going well into the fourth quarter against Gardner-Webb. So they should improve. They should be a better team than the last time they took the field. But all that said, and even though they have some talent, they have a decent number of transfers that came down from power conference programs, this is about Carolina. This is about getting consistently adequate quarterback play. And if that happens, the Tar Heels will win this game and may win fairly comfortably. They should. The talent on the field, if you were to check the position group boxes, Carolina's going to win all those battles except the one at quarterback. And to be honest with you, if you talk to JMU people, and I know quite a few, very good buddy of mine is as a big booster down there, and a couple other former teammates played football there. They're not sold on Barnett, the quarterback. A lot of people already want a quarterback change. He's a guy that can do some dynamic things, but they say he struggles with the basics, which would kind of make sense. 106 of their 119 plays, they're averaging less than 3 yards a play. So they have some issues. Maybe they got some of those issues straightened out in the open date. Yeah. This will be a nice little test for the Tar Heels. They should win by a couple touchdowns or more, and they should get enough guys in the game that they can take that experience, close the non-conference season 4-0, and head to Duke next week with some confidence, but also a lot of knowledge. This game should help them get some knowledge.
Yeah, no, I completely agree more. I think it's really intrigued to see this one because I think, this is the toughest test so far that we've seen at home, Minnesota being the toughest game of the year so far, but it's only going to get tougher after this. And I do think this is still a very winnable game. So you want to see progression at the quarterback position. You want to see continued improvement on defense, particularly from that D line, continue to, play as well as they have. And you want to see, maybe a less carries for Armarion because they're more of a danger through the pass play. So a lot of key little things you can kind of take away from this game. Don't just look at the opponent and say, I don't need to watch this one. This is an easy win no matter what. I don't think anything's going to be an easy win right now for North Carolina moving from now to the rest of the season based on what we've seen so far. But I do think it's one that the Carolina, if they play well and if they get some positive, at least some halfway decent to average quarterback play, I do think it's one that they should be able to win by a couple of touchdowns. AJ, we do have a couple of questions from some people on Twitter I want to throw at you real quick. This one's from at Jeremiah Artacho. Shout out, Jeremiah. Appreciate you getting this question in. What are your thoughts about true freshman wide receiver Jordan Shipp? Just to run through his snap counts real quick before I kick it to you. Didn't play versus Minnesota, but 13 snaps versus Charlotte, 11 versus Central. So, guy we talked about a lot in the preseason as well. What are your thoughts on where he's at in his progress?
Yeah, I thought we'd see more of him than we have by now. And I said, hey, he could be a heavy rotation guy by the middle of the season. In some conversations I've had, I think that he's still learning how to run routes as a college player. And that's part of it. And the blocking is a deal. They need to block well at receiver, especially if they're going to run a lot. And Lonnie Galloway has always put a huge premium on blocking as a receiver coach. In fact, one of the reasons Christian Hamilton plays a ton, he's the best blocking receiver that they have. And that has him on the field. So Jordan is a young guy. He's got immense talent. He's got the most talent in that room, but he's also a young guy, hasn't figured out a way to tap into that talent. And they're trying to get him to be better at running routes, trying to get him to be a better pass blocker. And as those things come into shape, you'll see more Jordan Shipp on the field. He's a splendid talent. Oh, yeah. He is breathtaking when he runs down, they beeline down the sideline, catches the ball in stride, just keeps going. He reminds me of some of those dudes that Clemson had when they were winning titles, the T. Higgins of the world. He's got some of that in him, a little bit of a notch above what Carolina typically has at wide receiver. So if he can get to the point where they're happy using him a lot, I think he'll be an asset for this team.
Yeah, that position's the wide receiver room's been a little bit of a surprise to me too, particularly Christian Hamilton. I mean, he's starting games. I knew he was a talent.
Best
I knew
blocker.
he played this year.
Runs around, best blocker, tough. Yeah. He's the toughest guy in the room.
Made a play on special teams last weekend as well. So.
He eats up blocks. In fact, he really, really gets a lot of pleasure out of watching film and seeing him make blocks, and not just make the block, but he sustains the block. A lot of receivers will make the initial hit, but they don't sustain the block. If you sustain it, Omarion has fewer tackles to break.
Yeah, he's been and made that really nice play on special teams with that punt, fumble, forced the fumble, and got the recovery. I thought that was a fantastic play from him last weekend as well.
He was special teams player of the game.
Yeah, deserved it, man. He's been a big surprise with how good he's been so far this year. And one more question. I think you actually already talked to this guy on Twitter a little bit and had some back.
Yeah, I realized afterward what you had done. So
yeah, no, you're good. I want to bring it up on here anyway because he did get it. It's at MCHMMRTM. I don't know what. Maybe there's a pronunciation for that I'm missing, but I'm just going to read that one off. Do you guys think having George Pettaway will give the JMU defense any type of noticeable advantage? For me, it's no, not really, just because of, coming in first year, really playing college football. He's not necessarily, he's second on the team in carries, tied with the quarterback, but Ayo Adai, which I mispronounce, has a couple more carries from him. It just hasn't got it done this year in terms of his yards per carry. But I do like Pettaway. I think he's a super talented running back. We talked about him a lot and interviewed him a lot in high school, particularly up in that Virginia Beach area. But I don't necessarily think, looking at him, he's going to be someone that Carolina's circled on the game plan of, like, we have to stop him or we're not going to be able to beat him.
I took the question being that, can he help JMU with their defensive plan? Maybe I took the question wrong.
I guess, now that I read it again, it kind of does.
That's how I responded. I don't think either way. I don't think Pettaway is going to make a big difference to Carolina's defense. I think they're going to play the way they play. As far as Pettaway helping JMU's defense, Carolina's got a new offensive line. They got a new quarterback, and they have a lot of different plays now than they had a year ago. I don't think Pettaway will impact the game that way at all. Now, he could play really well and he could break a few against Carolina, but I don't think it'll be just because it's Carolina. He's got added motivation. I'm not a big believer in the added motivation stuff, because most of these kids, when they put the gear on and they run out of the tunnel, they've got plenty of motivation already to do the job. That doesn't mean the teams are always ready to go. We've seen that in Chapel Hill quite a bit lately, but I don't think for Pettaway, it might be a little extra amped up, but you can often make mistakes when you're a little extra amped up. So yeah, I think in the end it's a wash.
Yeah, you are right. Now that I read the question over again, I was a little confused by that at first. Yeah, I guess he's coming at it from perspective of him being in the program, being able to maybe tell some things about what Carolina's going to, do.
Imagine the defensive meeting room, the coordinator. Okay, we got a special guest here. It's from the other side of the ball, George Pettaway. Yeah, George, dissect what they're going to do. Well, I know Willie Lampkin. I don't know who these other guys are. I kind of remember Trey Green a little bit. Never met Sampson, never met Banfield, never met Blasky, never met Greenberg. You know what I mean? And
completely new quarterback.
Yeah, I kind of remember Jacoby. I think I may have been in line behind him to get water one time in practice a couple years ago. It seems like a decent guy, and that Nesbitt guy's pretty good. They already know that. That J.J. Jones guy is pretty good. They already know that. I mean, there's nothing I think that he could illuminate at all.
He can tell him Omarion's pretty good. He'll see that.
Yeah, and that running back, I should have beat him out. I had the big play that first game. I had that touchdown in the first game against FAMU. Yeah. And everybody thought I was going to be the guy that played a lot early and Omarion would take a while. And lo and behold, he's the guy that's going to make $1 million. And I'm just trying to stay atop the depth chart here at JMU. So I've got nothing for you guys. This is a waste of time. Yeah, that's how that went.
Yeah, exactly. I did interpret that question wrong. I think I was assuming he meant offense instead of the defense, but I do see what he's saying now. Interesting perspective, interesting question to kind of look at. But no, I do agree with you. I don't think.
And remember you and I saw Pettaway. He didn't perform. I talked to him. This was in 2020 at the COVID at a camp. We saw Zach Rice, Tony Grimes, Pettaway, Doc Chapman. Anybody else? I think that was one of those.
I think that was the main four.
Yeah, and that worked out well for Carolina. That forced them.
That's a good point. You're absolutely right about that.
But I talked to George afterward out in the parking lot, actually, and he was a wonderful guy. Oh, yeah. Very, very talented. He kind of reminded me of a young Michael Carter, and I think he still does. But he's in a different place now, and he's doing pretty well, which is always good to see. You don't want to see kids struggle. But they're not picking his brain about anything.
No. Yeah, it's funny. George was actually one of the kids on the team that I would talk to the most. I mean, just from knowing him, and I interviewed him at some other stuff up in Virginia Beach that I went to after that camp. Talked to him on the field sometimes before and after the games, and would see him. We would do the three things on the field. He'd be, you see some of the players walk across the field to go to the parking deck. Talk to him a little bit then. So yeah, he's super nice kid, super good guy, and yeah, I'm glad to see he's doing relatively well at JMU because there is talent there, no doubt about it. But yeah. Got a guy like Armarion Hampton in the same room. You'll be hard pressed to be.
George ended up having a very, very good career there, and you could get to the league from there.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
I'm not saying he's that kind of guy, but I think that the staff, when they brought him into Chapel Hill, thought he could be a Sunday guy. So
yeah, 4-star, highly rated kid.
Yeah. Still there. So
yeah, no, he's we'll see what happens, man. We'll see what happens with that program under Bob Chesney. But it starts this Saturday against Carolina JMU, noon kickoff, ACC Network. Again, Carolina 10.5-point favorite. Over under set at 47.5. So we'll see what happens in that game. But yeah, I think it's a very winnable game for the Tar Heels, and I'm sure we'll have a ton to discuss on three things after the game on Saturday. I'm a fan of the noon games, AJ, I'll be in the stands for this one. I don't care if I'm in the stands. I don't care if I'm covering a game. I like a noon game. You can get home early, watch a little football in the evening, some of them primetime games. As far as I'm concerned, man, give me a noon kickoff. I don't mind it at all. I know a lot of fans hate it, but I don't mind it, man. I'm a big fan.
I might be home in time to watch the last couple of quarters of Cal FSU.
Oh, yeah, man.
Well, Cal against 0-3 FSU.
If FSU can get off the board, man.
I think that there needs to be have you been following Cal's Twitter?
Yes, I have seen some stuff.
There's some dudes that are on Cal Twitter that are absolutely laying the wood on everybody, man. They are fantastic. And this week they've just been trolling the living crap out of FSU. If you're a Twitter guy, go look up about 4 or 5 different Cal Twitter handles. They're having a good week. So I think a lot of the ACC people want to see FSU keep losing because it's become funny in some ways just because of all the crap. That's what everybody tells me anyway. So I think that'll be an interesting game. What a huge game for Cal. So I'm saying this because I actually might get to watch a little bit of some games. And
I wouldn't mind.
Stanford and Syracuse, I think, Friday night.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There's some good games this weekend, man. Syracuse looks really good with quarterback coming in. He's been fantastic.
Kyle McCord looks good. Kyle McCord, Cam Ward.
Yeah.
I think those are the guys in the league right now.
I think he leads the country. I think he did at one point. I think he leads the country in touchdown passes, I believe. He did at one point. Yeah, McCord.
I think he does. We'll see what happens after week 4. There hasn't been enough sample size yet.
Exactly. You can't overreact too much through 3 games, especially when you're playing some low-key non-conference opponents. But yeah, the reason I did see about that Cal Twitter too is shout out our very own Brett Friedlander. He put out a tweet last night that made me look into it a little bit more. I think he said like Cal's the best thing to happen to the ACC in a long time or something like that. And I'm like, man, that's a flip because we were flipping out about Cal, Stanford, and SMU 3 months ago. So what's that? I found
myself watching Cal and San Diego State. I taped the game, watched it on replay last night. That's how deranged I am. And I'm digging the whole Cal thing. They've embraced it. SMU's embraced it. Stanford. Cal and FSU on primetime this weekend is like the second time or third time they've been on primetime in the East Coast in 30 years.
Oh, I believe it, man.
Their exposure has jumped off the charts. All 3 of those schools, obviously SMU, but Cal and Stanford, the exposure has just skyrocketed. They're very, very happy. And all the morons saying, oh, they go back and play in the Mountain 12, Pac-12 or whatever, the Pac Mountain Conference. They're not doing that. They can't do it because of the grant of rights. And there's that other news about the ACC as well, which I've talked about on our boards and a little bit on some podcasts about the unequal revenue sharing was going to come because that's how you keep everybody happy. Mm-hmm. The young ones already voted, the little ones already voted for it, and the big ones want it. So when I say voted for it, by admitting some of the schools they did without getting the full share. So, but Cal, if you're a Twitter guy and you haven't been all over Cal's Twitter, just go. There's about 4 or 5 of them to follow, and they're fantastic.
Yeah, I need to go dive into it a little bit more because it's been
Stanford
all over.
Needs to pick up his Twitter game. I say
yeah, man, they got to step up.
SMU's pretty good too. SMU's got some good SMU guys. Both SMU and Cal fans are trolling the crap out of Florida State, which I just think is awesome. I don't have anything against Florida State. One of my favorite people in this business, the basketball side down there, Chuck Walsh, is one of my favorite people in the business. But I think it's funny that they've gone after the top doc, who, by the way, is 0-3, and so in the ACC. So
it's one of them perfect storms where they kind of had it. They were putting themselves in a position because of the chatter last year and the offseason that if they started this year bad, they were just going to get absolutely demolished by everybody. And that's exactly what's happened. And it's just, and granted, they haven't started with the easiest schedule in the world. I mean, I'm not going to say they haven't played like a game.
Okay, but here's the thing. Florida State's 0-3 and they haven't played a true road game yet.
That's a good point too.
And now they get Cal at home, who's won at Auburn and pounded San Diego State. If Cal goes in there and wins, Florida State will be 0-4 without having played a true road game yet. And if that's the case, find me wins on the schedule other than Charleston Southern.
Yeah.
That thing could completely melt down. If they lose this weekend and Cal is leading the country in forced turnovers and they're going up against DJU, I mean, those DBs at Cal are licking their chops right now.
Yeah, I saw Cal's forced like 9. It was like 9 turnovers.
They had 5 against Auburn.
What the hell? Like Auburn too. I mean, that was a good win, but you turn the ball over 5 times. You ain't gonna beat anybody. You're not gonna beat Wake Forest High School down the road. You're just not gonna do it. It's Jesus, man. Yeah, Cal, been a pretty good surprise so far. So hopefully they can keep it up for the sake of the ACC. But yeah, man, we'll see how this thing continue to plays out. And Carolina hasn't played an ACC game yet, AJ. So we got a lot of the season left.
And they don't play any of the 3 new teams this year. And in basketball, they play the 3 new teams at home only. So they don't have to go to California for football or basketball this year.
Yeah, I think that's fair too. You're new to the league, Carolina, we're not going to California. They have to come here this first year. Come on, guys. Come on, man. We ain't got time for that. Will be weird to see. It is weird because I've watched a few of those games. It is weird to see like an ACC logo in Cal Stadium and Stanford Stadium and SMU. It's just like weird.
Jersey.
I'm not used to that.
The jersey.
Yeah, the jersey as well.
The logo on their patches is just wild stuff.
What alternate reality are we living in right now?
Hey, man, look, it is what it is. I'm embracing it because there's no point in fighting it. And they brought in 3 good schools. They brought in 3 good schools that I think fit in a lot of ways. And the ACC can still be very, very good in its current composition. And
I've said this before, but I think the ACC, easiest thing they could do, man, keep the same logo, keep the same branding, just change it to the All-Coast Conference now. They're everywhere. You know what I mean?
I wouldn't be surprised if it just ends up being ACC over time. All if that's the actual name. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and keep the branding, just All Coast Conference. Easy fix. I do want that happens. I do need to talk to Jim Phillips because I need some royalties on that name change and everything because that's my idea, 100%.
Well, I think a lot of other people have said that, Jacob. I don't know if you can claim that.
No, that's me, AJ. I'm the only one who's thought of that idea. I don't know what you're talking about, man. I take full credit for that idea.
You're going to get a lot of comments on this one.
Oh man, let's get out of here, man. We're talking.
You could run for office with that comment.
Yeah, heck yeah, man. I'm the only one who's ever thought of that in the history of humanity. So I want to take full credit for that one. Let's get out of here. We're talking way too much ACC football. I don't know how we started talking about California in here, but it is funny to laugh at FSU.
I love it though. I mean, I covered the league for years. That's why I do something each week about the games coming up that week. I love covering the league. I love talking about it.
It's fascinating, man. It's absolutely fascinating. But I've been Jacob Turner. He's been Andrew Jones. Another edition of the UNC football show. We appreciate you watching as always. We'll be back on Saturday afternoon for 3 things, but also make sure you tune in to today's drop. AJ dropping a basketball drop today on Wednesday. I think it's going to start doing a little bit more of those basketball drops because, man, we ain't far from media day, only a few weeks away now. So basketball is creeping up, man. It always does. As soon as football starts, basketball's here, but
19 days.
Yeah, it's not far, man.
Wow.
Wild, isn't it? It is wild to think that.
You
only get to enjoy football for just solely football for a little bit. And then it's like, oh yeah, basketball's here. We got to start doing that too. So
love it.
Yeah, man. Better love it. Labor of love for sure. But yeah, man, keep it locked. Check out our other daily drops as well. Putting a ton of those out. But yeah, we'll be back on Saturday evening, early evening, hopefully. Maybe late afternoon, I'll say, for a 3 thing. So make sure you guys stay tuned for that one. Make sure you like the video. Let's do this. Like the video below if you think Carolina wins this weekend against JMU. I want to get 100+ on this one. I think we can definitely do that. And like this video below if you've been pleased with the defensive line and progression as well this season, because I do think they deserve a lot of love. What you got? I have to hand out the winner who the projected number of snaps for Connor. I've got to figure that out today. So if you
Yeah, I'll do that today, and
Okay.
and someone will get set up with a 1-year sub.
Stay tuned for that, guys. Very interested to see who wins that one, especially with him not playing as much. I think that one could be very interesting.
I have to write that down here. 1-year sub. How about that? You think that'll help me remember?
$833 a month too. You can do that. Sign up. Great time to do so. Basketball, especially knocking on the door. It's a great time to do it. We're recruiting in full swing as well. And if you don't want to, you can just shoot us a Venmo at Tar Heel Illustrated. We'd rather you sign up and get a ton of perks, but do that too.
A lot of that because people don't want to. They don't want to get tied into something. They're afraid to. Get constant regular payments taken out on the credit card.
Oh, I get it, man.
Venmo.
I get it. Yeah. We'd rather you sign up. I
appreciate everyone that's reached out there. That helps because you're keeping Miss King employed.
Yeah, man. It all goes back into to running the company, paying the staff, travel, all that stuff, man. So it's not like AJ's pocketing that Venmo and hitting the bars on Friday nights and buying some beers.
Those days crashed and burned a long time ago.
You ain't got time this time of year to even think about drinking a beer, AJ.
Although Kim and I are going to a concert in November.
Nice, man. Heck yeah. What concert?
In fact, we're going to see Morrissey. He's lead singer in Smiths.
Yeah.
Got a lot of solo stuff and he plays some Smith stuff. So yes, I'm old school alternative guy.
Heck yeah, man. That sounds right up your alley. That'll be a good time. You have a couple beers that night, couple Michelob Ultras or something like that.
I think Michelob Ultra might be calling my name that night.
Yeah, man. I think you'll deserve it by then too. All the work you're putting in. So
it'll be like a magnetic pull.
You're like, get me to that.
Race on over to the Michelob Ultra tent.
Yeah, man. Hey, what, 99 calories, man? Don't get no better than that.
I don't know. I know it's low carb beer, diet beer, baby.
I like it. I'm a little bit of a beer snob, but I do like a Michelob.
Yeah, I'm not an IPA guy.
Oh, I love an IPA.
I just don't do it. I'm fine with Michelob Ultra.
I bartended for a couple years when I graduated college, when I was doing this a little bit and trying to figure my way a little bit. And that's how I got into it a little bit. No liquor, but just beer, wine. I got into the craft beer scene.
I can't do liquor. I don't do wine. All I do is just like beer every rare once in a while.
Yeah.
Or when I go back home up in the Alexander, DC area.
Yeah. You got to do that.
A couple. Just a couple, man. No more than that, right? Yeah. That's
all right, man. Let's get the heck out of here. I didn't have Michelob Ultra. Michelob, if you want to sponsor, let us know. But
yes, they should, along with 5 Hour Energy. In fact, the day after a couple of Michelob Ultras, I have 5 Hour Energy to get rolling.
Yeah, still haven't heard from 5 Hour.
I think Michelob Ultra should sponsor us. I'd be perfectly happy with that.
No, yeah, man.
Wait, did you see what Bruce Young got me?
I do like that. I was wondering where you got that because I noticed it on your drops. Sweet, man.
He had this woman do it.
That's right up your freaking alley right there.
Right up my alley.
That's amazing. I love that.
Eddie,
that's awesome.
Eddie.
The backdrop looks nice right now, man. It really does. Got a lot of stuff going on.
I've been messing around with it, so I'll have something new here, but I'm going to let that one go for a while because if I don't, Bruce will probably put lead in my head. So.
And on that note, we're going to actually get the heck out of here. I've been Jacob Turner. He's been Andrew Jones. Appreciate you guys watching. Thanks. As always, hit that subscribe button, notification bell too, so you know every single time we upload. And guys, we'll see y'all next time. Thanks.